the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Justin.
Hey, Lindsay. So, we're doing Batman 1989. I think this was a good transition out of our sequel episode where because there's been so many sequels and I guess like reincarnations of Batman. But this being the first, not necessarily the first, but the first official big budget movie that I think most your casual Batman fan would recognize as being the first.
Definitely.
And I consider myself a casual Batman fan.
It changed the tone from the show from the 60s with Adam West that was, not at all what this Batman turned into at all.
Yeah. And this is our second Tim Burton movie that we've done for the podcast.
It was 20 episodes ago,
right,
so
right,
it's fine.
But there's been times where I've like wanted to do another Tim Burton movie, and I was like, oh, we need to wait. So I feel like enough time has passed.
Yeah.
So
it's time.
Another Tim Burton film.
And we feel that this Batman is important for a lot of reasons. And we'll go further into this, but as far as the idea of a superhero movie and marketing, and also just kind of reinvigorating this franchise that before that didn't really, the idea of a superhero movie wasn't really the thing that it is.
Yeah, it was
nowadays.
It was not common like it is now.
Yeah.
Now
it happened, but
they'll take the most obscure comic and make it, they'll build a movie around it.
That was a superhero? What?
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. And we actually, I was excited, cause we were doing Batman and we like Batman. Now we both have talked about this. Like we did not grow up reading comic books. So
True.
My entry into this Batman film when I was a kid was not really having an association to the comics. So like anything that this movie did that was outside of the grain of how the character or characters were represented in the comic books didn't affect me because I didn't have that knowledge. But I did not want that to be something that was left out of this episode. So I contacted our good buddy, Wade Durbin, who in my mind is about as close as you can get to a comic book knowledgeable person. And, and I sent him a message asking him if he could tell me what he thinks the general consensus is for comic book people on Batman 1989 now, like what's the feeling. And so he sent me a pretty interesting long message, so we'll get into that later when we're discussing sort of Batman and this being a Tim Burton film and being part of the character in the franchise. And
maybe you have a lot of opinions on it. Maybe you're a comic book fan. I like that we're talking about this movie as two people that are aware of comic book characters. We just didn't grow up on them, and I think the comic books that I've read are a handful, like Ghost World and Preacher and like Mouse Guard and the X-Files comics, but like I don't think that counts as being a comic book fan at all. I read them for a purpose.
When I think too, like this is something that I definitely respect people's opinion when they, it's. If you grew up on something and it's turned into something else, I mean, I look at this I look at the way people have strong feelings about Batman 1989 or the same way I have strong feelings about the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Nightmare on Elm Street. Movies that are near and dear to my heart that I grew up on and I know them a certain way and they're represented a certain way. Yeah. And for someone to come in and dismantle that and then me to like pay money to go see it, I was like, what? So I can understand people's disappointment or their animosity toward this particular incarnation of Batman. But me having not, and that's the thing, is like someone who's never seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, someone who's never seen the original Nightmare on Elm Street, they might go into a new version or a new remake or reboot and say this movie is awesome because they have no frame of reference. And that's how I feel. I'm just living in ignorant bliss about Batman 1989, and I'll just remain that way until I die.
I think that's exactly how I feel too. I like that you and I agree on Batman 89. I do think that it's a conversation, though, and that's why I'm glad we're doing this one.
Well, and I think, and that's the thing is, too, is like I didn't want to speculate or like research like what people are thinking. That's why I wanted to ask Wade and see what, because I knew he would be tapped into that idealism of like what's happening.
And he has opinions, that's for sure.
He has opinions, so, and they're very strong in the message that he sent me, so I'll read that later. That'll be a good one. But outside of that, just in general, talking about some of the things that make this a Batman movie that we like and a superhero movie that we like, and then also talking about the cast, because a lot of controversial and interesting casting happened in this movie. Maybe we'll get into a little insider Hollywood, some of the situations that went down behind the scenes.
Yeah,
that's always fun.
It wasn't the easiest movie to get made.
It wasn't the easiest one to get made, and a lot of moving parts, and all on the shoulders of a very successful but extremely young director. Mm-hmm. I think Tim Burton was like 29 when he shot Batman.
Is that right?
Which is pretty crazy.
And he was not the first choice, and people weren't stoked about it. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, and then after our discussion, as always, we'll do our picks of the week. I kept mine very comic book centric with the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that came out in 1990. It was just like maybe a year after Batman, and I feel like Batman sort of paved the way for a movie like that to even be possible, to make like a big screen version of that comic book and cartoon.
I'm so glad you did that one. I haven't thought about it in a long time.
I hadn't either, and it's it's still again, it's not one I'd want to do a whole podcast on, but there's still stuff to watch. It's still worth looking at. And you did.
I did a movie that is connected to Batman by way of Jack Nicholson, and it's one that I would say is not at the top of the list as far as movies that he's done in his entire career, but it was this movie from the 90s called Wolf, with he and Michelle Pfeiffer and James Spader. It's a movie that people are never like, oh man, have you seen Wolf? Yeah. But I think it is.
You're the only person that ever said that to me.
It's one of those movies that just kind of escapes. It is made. There's nothing really that's bad about it. It's a good story, but it just kind of is there, has like amazing actors in it, and just kind of like fades away. And I'm glad I get to reintroduce it, I guess.
I certainly remember it coming out, but I think it was like it came out during a time where I don't know, maybe it didn't appeal to my sensibilities, and then it's not one that's ever referenced. I've never heard it, so I mean, I'm glad that you picked this one. I think it's good to.
I think there's like there's a whole era of like the mid 90s that had a lot of thrillers, and I think I saw all of them because it was such a popular genre of like any varying type of thriller, whether it's like, Copycat with serial killers or The Net. There's just I was a big fan of the thriller genre. Anyway, we'll talk about our picks of the week a little bit later.
So before and after our picks of the week, as always, our MurrayMoment. But before that, can you tell us what is this version of Batman about? Tim Burton's 1989 Batman.
Batman.
What revolves around this version of Batman?
You might have heard of this guy, Batman. So we're introduced to Gotham City's masked crime-fighting hero in a human-sized, muscular, kind of hot bat suit. He's the city's most wealthy, eligible bachelor, Bruce Wayne, who also happens to be Batman. And due to an accident with toxic waste, Batman turns one of the city's most well-known thug gangster types into a psychotic, homicidal nemesis that we come to know as the Joker, and the story unfolds from there.
It's pretty thrilling stuff.
It is.
I'm a huge fan. Well, we'll get into it, but I'm a huge fan of the portrayal of the Joker in this movie.
Oh, for sure.
We'll go to a clip from Batman, and then we'll get into our first discussion.
Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man! Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man!
I'm not going to kill you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
So right away, again, just saying we didn't come from comics. So to me, this was like my first. I mean, I knew who Superman was. I knew Batman was. I mean, I knew that comics existed. I'm not saying I did. I never.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not
Same.
saying I never picked up a comic book in my life. You know, I mean, I certainly did, but like, I wasn't. I couldn't tell you who were any side characters or whatever from anything. But Batman was like my first jump into like a world of like comic book quote unquote movies. You know what I mean? And it does, like, when I look back at this movie now, and I will say that there's been a good, I would say it was a good 10 years since I've seen this movie when I watched it prior to doing this episode. And it does feel smaller, I won't lie. It does feel a bit dated. But the one thing that does feel very signature is that of Tim Burton and his style and his look, and especially like his early films. And to me, it's kind of, I mean, that's what I love most about it, I think, is the way it looks and is the feel of the movie. It has a solid good versus evil classic Hollywood theme going on that is like up front and center. The movie definitely is thin on plot, and it's definitely thin on what makes these characters tick.
Yes.
Everything is like very black and white. It's just like, this is why this guy's mad because of this, and this guy's evil because of this. There's never, we don't get too much backstory, but to me, there's enough going on in the movie where like that doesn't really bother me. I look at it as like this very late 80s like action adventure, like big budget, and I remember the excitement. This is one of the few movies I remember, like, I went to the theater I had my...
You saw it 3 times?
Yeah, I saw this 3
Whoa.
times in the theater. This was one where I think like an entire summer, the first summer this came out on VHS, I watched it like almost every day, at least once during the afternoon.
Yeah, I think Batman, it was one that I definitely remember seeing in the theater. A character that I was familiar with because of, I watched the reruns of the show like after school when I was a kid. And then when, this movie started getting, the trailers were coming out and the hype was built up around it, I already, even though I was a kid, I knew who these actors were, and it was like an epic event, and everything about this movie was an epic event. And I remember being so jazzed about it. And even though it is thin on plot, I think it's an action movie that doesn't need a deep plot necessarily, because if you have something that is basically good versus evil, and we have the setup that this is the avenging crime fighter, we already know that he's set up to defend those people that are victims. He's set up to defend the common man. And I think, if anything, this movie really rides more on the fun factor of it, and that Tim Burton makes this movie that is incredibly dark, or the idea of Batman is pretty dark. His style makes this movie, it really encompasses what I feel like is a very comic booky, colorful aspect to it, but also makes it fun by having the introduction of the Joker, who's a complete psychotic, but still, I'm always really entertained by a crazy person that's laughing through, them electrocuting someone by shaking their hand, and they have a, what are those things called? Like the little buzzer in your hand where but the Joker's electrocuting someone and frying them to death when laughing at the same time. Like it's this hilarious psychoticness of Jack Nicholson's Joker character that injects this humor into something that is totally serious. And the idea of Batman really is it's something that couldn't happen in reality, let's face it. I think the way that this Batman is presented takes it and makes it kind of feel like it's real, and the idea of Gotham City, that this city doesn't exist and it feels very otherworldly. I think that all of that wrapped in a bubble is kind of the perfect vehicle for Tim Burton to make this happen.
Well, and I think too, like just Gotham City in itself, there's more a plot about Gotham City itself than there are about the characters, which I think is, I mean, to me, like when I was younger, a lot of that stuff was lost on me, but like watching it now, like there is a lot about like a city that's like feeling hopeless and it's like crime ridden, and it's like, do we even have the money or the funds or like the excitement or the want to have a celebration of like the 200th anniversary of our city, you know? And I think that a lot of
Blade Runners were running around Gotham City.
A lot of the political stuff like was definitely not something that I think I was like real aware of when I was younger, and now that plays more interesting to me. But I think it gives it enough edge, it gives it enough intelligence, you know what I mean? Because the rest is like kind of like a dumbed down action movie, but I really enjoy it, and I do like what you said with the Joker, like this sort of, he's very psychotic, but he is like the anti-hero, and you're always like half rooting for him just because he's not, he is so outrageous, but he is very likable in a way.
And I think the Jack Nicholson Joker is the closest that we've ever gotten to the Cesar Romero Joker of the Batman show in the 80s, in the 60s. But I think that Jack Nicholson, and it's probably because, you know, one was on TV in the 60s and the other is a Hollywood movie, Jack Nicholson takes it to a much darker level, but it's the same kind of feel, just a little bit more psychotic.
There was an intention, I think, to make Batman much darker than the 60s interpretation of the television show, but then I think that like as we went on, it got much darker and deeper into, you know, the characters, which is good, you know. But I still, to me, this will always be, I mean, and I've seen most of the Batman movies. I haven't seen the newer one with Ben Affleck, but like, to me, this is always going to be Batman to me. And when I think of Batman, this is always going to be the movie that will be like close to my heart. I did not want to not think about the comic book community in regards to Batman. But I did want to, I didn't know how that we could address it. You know what I mean? Because we can't watch this movie the way.
And be as well versed in the history. So
we contacted our good friend Wade Durbin, who we've both has been our bandmate.
Yeah,
and
we can vouch for this guy.
Yeah,
he's solid.
He's solid, and his comic book knowledge and his movie knowledge is
vast.
Is very vast and deep. And so I messaged him and I said, hey, you know, here's what we're doing on the podcast. We're doing Batman, and I knew that he would have strong feelings about it. And so I said,
I already know his facial reaction.
I said, hey, can you speak up on what people who are comic book fans, like people like you that grew up on comics, who like know the comics, who know the character, what is the consensus? What is the consensus of that community on Batman 1989? And he had a lot to say. So I will, if we have a moment here, I'll read his message that he sent me.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I couldn't have said, you know, I mean, I feel like I couldn't have read some stuff about it and sort of like hearsay, you know, like I don't think I could have like come up with this. So I think just going right to the source.
I think because you need it from someone that has those feelings legitimately, and you can't just read something and regurgitate. This is what this community feels like. You need someone that actually feels it and can kind of siphon all of that into one opinion. I think in a lot of ways that this Batman, 1989 Batman, is a standalone film. And I think that I would kind of put it again with like, I would kind of put it with Batman Returns, its sequel, as a unit, as a cohesive, like standalone, like 1-2.
Yeah.
But I can see where someone would have a problem with it if you are a comic book fan. But if you look at it as a standalone, franchise, as just this 1-2 Batman and Batman Returns, I don't know. I love them. I'm really anxious to hear what Wade has to say.
So here's what Wade wrote me back. He says, I think the reception of Batman 1989 from comic book fans is very complicated. Considering that Superman 4 came out only 2 summers prior, I think there was a great sense of relief that it was a big-budget film using A-list talent. The darker tone was embraced by the masses, and the massive box office take possibly made some diehard comic book fans feel validated in their hobby. Pre-1989, a grown adult in a superhero shirt out in public was almost unthinkable. He then goes on to say, however, I feel like there was a slow building backlash, similar in the way that Phantom Menace went from holy crap, new Star Wars movie to worst movie ever made in the span of about a year. Things moved much slower back then, though. He said, first of all, the willy-nilly changes Burton made to the mythos rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. The all-black outfit, which at that point the character had never worn, Batman's lax attitude toward murder, the Joker's involvement in Bruce Wayne's parents' death, and the 2 Prince songs played in their entirety. Mainly, Batman 1989 says a lot more about Tim Burton than it says about Batman. It's a freaky-looking character wearing all black, just kind of doing stuff from scene to scene. No narrative thrusts, no goals, no logical endpoint. A nearly plotless showcase for beautiful art direction. Honestly, to date, there has never been a satisfying live-action depiction of Batman. So there you have it, like it or not, a very thought-out version of what someone who comes from comics feels. And I can understand everything that he's saying there in that message.
Yeah.
And to me, again, this is something that I never even had a second thought about. Like the color of Batman's costume or any of that kind of stuff never really came into play because I did not have any knowledge of that prior to this.
To me, it makes sense why the costume would be amended and be bulked up. And also when you have a movie that's supposed to be bigger, larger than life type of thing, come out the way that it did. But yeah, I can understand what Wade's saying in that just so many changes, there being a slow burn of a backlash.
And I think too, like, exactly what you're saying is like, I think like when this came out, the idea, you want to make this big, larger than life outfit. You want to have some Batmobile that no one's ever seen. I mean, you want this guy to have these things that like no one, it's like they're all one of a kind instruments that he has at his fingertips because he's like a billionaire and he can he's the only one that can afford to have all this. And granted, again, none of this is explained. How did he get all this stuff? Who creates all these things? I mean, they go into that in the other Batman movies.
What does he do?
But just I mean, it's just kind of like all there. It's just like but it all happens very fast, and you just kind of accept it. You're like, and you're happy with it, or you question. You're like,
and again, thin on plot. Totally thin on plot, but in the world that is set forth for us, there is a plot. It's not like it's just like out there, just Batman's running around town. There is totally a plot, but it's not exactly like the deepest thing in the world. Do we necessarily, give a crap where Bruce Wayne got his money? No, that's not our first thought at all. Do we even really care about the romance between he and Vicky Vale, the Kim Basinger character? Not really. It's just kind of happening.
Yeah, to me, it's more of I'm more interested in Batman in this movie.
Yes, exactly.
Though I do enjoy Michael Keaton's portrayal of Bruce Wayne. To me, this is all about when he's Batman. That's when I'm like the most excited.
I think it's time that we maybe go to another clip and then talk about the cast a little bit.
We'll talk about.
Let's talk about
Batman
Michael Keaton.
That we know. Yeah, okay. Yeah. We'll go to a clip with Michael Keaton as Batman, then we'll talk about Michael Keaton as Batman.
How many times can we say Batman?
Wow.
Let me tell you about this guy I know, Jack. Mean kid, bad seed, hurt people. I like him already. The problem was he got sloppy. crazy.
He started to lose it.
He had a head full of bad wiring, I guess. Couldn't keep it straight up here. He was the kind of guy who couldn't hear the train till it was 2 feet from him. You know what happened to this guy, Jack? Well, made mistakes. And then he had his right shot. Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Tell me something, my friend. You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
What?
I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
So Michael Keaton as Batman, Bruce Wayne and Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the one thing I do remember of when this movie came out. There was serious controversy about Michael Keaton portraying the role as Bruce Wayne and Batman. And so I remember that, but I looked into it further when we were researching for the podcast.
Okay.
And 50,000 letters were sent to Warner Brothers Studios, you know, basically saying like, do not cast Michael Keaton as Batman. This is terrible. He's going to be like the worst Batman ever. And I want to say when the movie came out, like a lot of those people maybe felt okay about Michael Keaton as Batman. But there was much controversy, I think, initially because and understandably so. I mean, Michael Keaton had really just been known as a comedic actor. He was really great in Clean and Sober, but that was a movie that few people had seen, and it came out like right before Batman.
Yeah.
And so no one really knew what he could do.
People knew him as Beetlejuice. He was
Right,
Beetlejuice, which is, I think Michael Keaton is a great actor. But when you're going from basically Beetlejuice to Batman, and you're like, Mr. Mom is going to be Batman,
Right,
dude?
yeah.
What?
So I mean, I certainly can understand actors get pigeonholed all the time, and then when they try to break out of that, they have to be tested.
Yeah.
I think another good example, Jim Carrey stepping out of comedy and doing like Truman Show or Man on the Moon.
Man on the Moon, yeah.
Where I thought he was fantastic in those movies, but
Eternal
the first
Sunshine,
time,
dude.
but the first time, you know, I was like, what? Jim Carrey's doing a serious movie. So I can see that, but I do think that to me, Michael Keaton is the definitive Batman. I have seen all the Christian Bale movies, and I saw the Batman.
I've seen Batman Forever, Batman and Robin.
And both of those Batmans, Val Kilmer and George Clooney, are pretty lame to me. I think Christian Bale's okay, but to me, Michael Keaton is the definitive Batman, Bruce Wayne in my mind. And I think and I think that what he adds to me, and I know that that's probably not indicative to the comic books, but I kind of like the little goofiness, flirtation that he adds to the Bruce Wayne character in the first Batman. You know, when he's like talking to Vicky Vale and when he's talking to Knox's character, the reporter. I like that he has like a little bit of goof to him. And I mean, you know, and he's definitely Michael Keaton's playing to his strength there. But I think that when he switches over and he has to be like a serious brooding character, I mean, I think he doesn't have any problem in that area as well.
Yeah, I think he flips it really well. In 89 Batman, I think I almost care about Bruce Wayne more than I do Batman. I find him very charming, and he is just like a rich white dude, and I don't really remember this aspect in any of the other sequels or incarnations. In this Batman, it almost feels like he's so wealthy, but he's also very generous at the same time, but to the point that he doesn't even really think about it. He's just like in the scene you were just talking about with Vicky Vale and Robert Wool's character, the reporter. He's like, is there anything you guys need? And Robert Wool's like, a grant, like jokingly. And then, you know, whatever joke or, conversation goes on and on for a couple minutes. And then as Bruce Wayne is exiting, he's like, telling his butler, I need you to get glasses of champagne, this and this and this, and get this guy a grant.
Yeah.
And it's just one of these things that he is a totally rich white dude.
Right.
Someone that maybe I wouldn't necessarily feel any type of sympathy or whatever for.
Right. I know your hatred for rich white dudes.
You know what I'm trying to say, though.
If
Just
only
saying,
more rich white dudes could be like Michael Keaton and Batman.
Yeah,
That's what you're
totally.
trying to say. Exactly.
Exactly.
I agree with you.
He seems, for a rich white dude, he seems as down to earth and eccentrically strange, or eccentric and strange, or that's the same thing. He just seems like a likable guy. I would say out of all the Batmans, I feel like Michael Keaton's depiction from Bruce Wayne to Batman is the biggest 180. I always just almost say Patrick Bateman, but Christian Bale. No,
I agree with you. I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think it is the biggest leap from like I would almost say like a sensitive character, like, or someone who's got a little bit of soul. Like I feel like
he's got
I
more
feel
heart.
like the Christian Bale portrayal is like a very cold,
broody, and
even,
Batman's broody.
Yeah.
And I feel like the other depictions that we've seen of Batman have just been so one-dimensional or throwaway, or just that Batman really, like the Val Kilmer Batman and the George Clooney Batman specifically. I honestly don't remember the Ben Affleck Batman. No offense, I just don't remember it.
I didn't see it.
It just seemed not really. Those movies really weren't about Batman. It was about the whole production of making this movie about Batman, it was just about extenuating the franchise, not necessarily the character of Bruce Wayne and Batman. And I honestly feel, Michael Keaton did the best job at that.
Yeah, and I mean, and like again, I don't have a reference to the comics, and maybe it was a bold choice for him to go lighter with the Bruce Wayne character.
Sure.
But I enjoy it, and I feel like in Batman Returns, Michael Keaton brings it. He's a little darker in his Bruce Wayne persona than he is in his. They sort of like meet in the middle, and I think you get a little more into the darker side of his Bruce Wayne character and his past.
Yeah,
into it.
I think Bruce Wayne, honestly, in this movie is kind of a weirdo. I like him because he's kind of a weirdo.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, I know we talked about it a little bit, but Jack Nicholson. So Michael Keaton was not the first pick for Batman, and Jack Nicholson was certainly not the first pick for the Joker. He was very loved by one of the producers on the film who really was pushing for Jack Nicholson. And I want to say Jack Nicholson didn't even want to do the movie. And you have a little information on this, right?
Yeah, he was wanted for the role. But the person that was vying for the role, like pretty hardcore, was Robin Williams. And Robin Williams, like super duper wanted the role and like was going full force for it. And I feel like it wasn't necessarily like set in stone that he was going to get it, but he was the person that was going for it. And that it was kind of an all verbal deal. That they were thinking, maybe Robin Williams is going to get this. And then at the last second, Jack Nicholson is like, okay, guys, I'll totally do it for you, but I want a boatload of money. And I also want a portion of box office, whatever this movie brings in. So I don't remember the exact figures, but he brought in, I think what he made, like being paid as an actor, he made more money from what was brought in from the movie than he did actually for acting in the film.
I know at one time, and I don't know if it's still the case, someone might have topped him, but I do remember it for a long time at least, and maybe it's still the case, that Jack Nicholson was in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most paid for one movie, and I want to say it was like topped out at like 50 or 60 million that he got paid at the end of,
I think it was $60 million.
At the end of everything with like cuts of like proceeds, so good move on him, I mean, for someone who was in their 50s when he did the Joker, you're looking at some retirement money.
No, I don't know. Jack Nicholson's, He's got it going on in this movie.
I think he did a great job because he played Jack Napier very small amount of time on screen, but gave him a lot of depth. You know, you really get the sense that this guy is a cool, collected, confident gangster, has a lot of power before he becomes the Joker. And I think you need that. You know, I like that they gave us the precursors to the Joker, that the movie just didn't open on this zany, crazy Joker character, that we see a transition.
Yeah.
And I do understand that this is, you know, you need to do that transition quickly. And I thought that they did the best that you could possibly do with transitioning characters in like such a short span of time to like within the universe of this movie. And I thought it was like really natural and really well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He pops out on the other end of this crazy accident as the Joker.
Yeah, we set the Joker up as, we know that he's a prominent figure in, you know, the seedy underbelly of the crime world of Gotham City. And basically that's what we know. And then his boss sets him up to get caught in this situation with the police, which is the incident that leads Batman to accidentally shoving him or letting him drop into a, you know, pit of toxic waste or whatever it is.
When I think that too, and
thus turning him into the Joker.
Yeah, and I think too, this is like, it's such a subtle scene, but I think it really says a lot about his character before he became the Joker, when he's sleeping with his boss's wife, and they're together alone, and she says something like, well, you look really good or whatever, and then he's like, I didn't ask. You know, and it's just, to me,
it's such a
very
smug,
it's just such a very like, you know, he knows he's got,
he was already an a-hole.
He was already like a smooth and kind of like cold and calculating person. But him losing that vanity, that was the only thing that really weirdly, the only humane thing about him was his vanity, which is like really messed up.
That's
and
deep.
So you take that away and he's just this like psychopath.
Yeah.
You know, because he's like, no one, you know, people are just going to look at me like I'm a total crazy now because I look crazy. So what else do I have to cling to that, like, where I'm trying to stay amongst, you know, normal society?
And he does kind of return to that vanity a few times when he because the toxic waste or whatever that he falls into makes his skin white. And so he, in order to fit in certain situations, like puts makeup on his face that's like regular, like his regular skin tone. So it kind of does return to that little vanity for a second. And actually, those are the parts I remember as a kid, when he inevitably gets splashed with water or something in his face that makes that like Caucasian makeup stream down his face. He looked the creepiest to me like that, actually. And it wasn't that his face was, you know, ashen white. It was just like...
Yeah, and that was something I think that I never really, when I was little, I was like, wait, what's happening? You know, you know.
No, he's totally creepy. I mean, as a kid, his maniacal laughter was kind of infectious, and he was a funny character. But as an adult watching him, you're like, that guy is freaking crazy, out of his GD mind.
Well, let's
like this scene that we're watching right now.
Right.
Sorry.
The parade scene.
Parade scene where he's called all of Gotham City out, and he's like, I'm going to drop millions of dollars on the city. Come on out here, guys. I'm going to drop millions of dollars. And what's he actually going to do? He's dropping dollars, but he's also going to gas the entire city and kill them. Maniac.
He's like, where's your... My favorite line in this whole movie is like, and where's your Batman? He's at home washing his tights. I don't know why. It's just so silly.
There are many lines that the Joker has in this movie that are pretty dang funny.
Well, let's we got to wrap it up here on Batman talk. We should move on to our picks of the week. I went for comic book movie, the first film incarnation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which came out in 1990. And that's a movie, too, that I feel like that's been rebooted recently too. And this, to me, the original, in my mind, in my heart, is still like what I consider to be the ultimate Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie. And I was not familiar with the Turtle comics. I grew up on the cartoon. So when I went into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I was actually like really into the cartoon. I think they based most of the movie on the cartoon, but I'll get into that in my pick of the week. Yours was Wolf, which was one that I hadn't seen. Do you want to kick this off with your telling us a little bit about
Yeah,
Wolf
I definitely
with Jack
can.
Nicholson?
I was all saddled up to hear about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I was just getting you primed. I didn't want to like...
No, I'll be more than happy to talk about Wolf. I guess we need a little superhero break.
Yeah, let's take
Right?
a little break from superheroes.
Yeah.
You know, and take a break from me yapping. I just want, you know...
You want another voice in this podcast, Justin?
Now for the voice of Lindsay Reber.
Your
Your regular voice.
My regular voice. Which actually sounds like this.
If you've like thrown your voice this whole time as like a podcaster.
Yeah, I have.
We get off mic. You're like, so anyway, I got to get back to my house. It's getting pretty late. We're going to end this soon.
It's 8:32, Justin. All right, let me tell you about Wolf.
So tell me a little bit about Wolf.
So the Joker himself, Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, also who is in Tim Burton's Batman Returns, and James Spader star in this not too well-remembered werewolf movie from 1994, aptly titled Wolf. Directed by a favorite of mine, R.I.P. Mike Nichols. This movie has kind of sunken away into the annals of 90s horror light romantic thrillers. Certainly a cross genre that's not well explored, in my opinion anyway. You'd expect a full-on horror movie when talking about werewolves, but this one's kind of a little different. It's intelligent and engrossing while involving the usual full moon, heightened senses and strength after being bitten, and predatory behavior aspects that typically follow the werewolf genre. However, what's especially unique about this one is its overall plot. Nicholson plays an unassuming senior editor at a publishing house, nowhere near the overbearing character we might assume that the actor would play. Now, playing it down for this role probably adds to the dramatics of when he actually does, to use a Joss Whedon term, wolf out. He gets attacked in the first scene of the film, so we're set up from the get-go. After being fired from his job early on in the film, finding out the guy who's replacing him, which is James Spader, is also sleeping with his wife, this would be a lot for anyone to take in, let alone knowing that you're slowly turning into a wolf. That's kind of a lot. I mean, I've been dealing with a lot this week, but that's more than I've been dealing with. This movie as a whole is a metaphor for being chewed up and spit out in the corporate world, human and relationship morals, and kind of more obviously animal instincts. The special effects of Wolf are on the lighter side, which I think is a cool choice and kind of appropriate for a movie that's not trying to be a straight-up horror movie. I kind of have to say that Nicholson is pretty dang handsome when he's all wolfed out. And when he is in beast mode, he's kind of a furry hybrid, more human than wolf. He kind of ages backwards when he's a wolf, in my humble opinion. Not trying to sexualize Jack Nicholson here, but he's kind of handsome. I think more of the budget of the movie went to the two main actors. And that said, Michelle Pfeiffer does play a hefty supporting role, but is nevertheless stellar and even kind of moving in some scenes. She kind of portrays this smart yet defiant woman who falls for Nicholson pre and post Wolf. And upon rewatching this, her role harkens back to Gina Davis in The Fly, but it's not derivative, but it's very similar. I hadn't thought of that until this last viewing. Now, while I kind of personally like the pace of this movie, if you're looking for a straight-up action or horror movie, this movie is not for you. It's a romantic thriller of a film, but there's a hell of a lot of tension, and Nicholson is writing so many ways in which he's been wronged. But then the movie does take a turn into a frighteningly unexpected third act. Now, Wolf isn't about the body count. It's not sensational. It's more about this guy having a somewhat depressing realization that he's about to not be human anymore. In some ways, the movie reminds me of the original monster movies of the 1930s. There's a certain sadness that comes along with becoming a werewolf. And I think that's a theme that's not really explored in contemporary werewolf movies. I do have one caution, though. If you can't handle animal violence, I always shut my eyes and cover my ears when a deer serves as Nicholson's first kill. So if you're a sensitive baby like me, when it comes to that, you've been warned. So, Wolf may not satisfy a bloodthirsty horror fan, but if you're looking for a good story to sink your teeth into, sorry, I couldn't help but say that, watching Nicholson, Pfeiffer, and Spader propel this movie forward has always called me back many, many times over the years to my taped VHS copy of this version, and always at the end of the movie leaves me with a good old smirk.
So this is one, like I said, I haven't seen it yet, but if you're wanting to check this out as well, where can you find this? I believe the only place, it's not on Netflix currently, I think, but you can find, like, you can rent it as an Amazon rental or online rental. Yeah, you can
rent it on Amazon, Google Play, Vudu, YouTube, the usual suspects. But yeah, it's not available on Netflix or Hulu right now, from what I can figure out. Or some shadier service if you really want to go that route.
Yeah, I even like when I was said, because sometimes I've been able to find some of the movies you do. I've been finding them on VHS at Goodwill's, but I've not stumbled across
Wolf.
Yeah. Well, my pick this week again is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I want to revisit this so bad. Come on.
Yeah, this is one that, so this movie came out in 1990. I do believe that the success of Batman was allowed movies like this one to come out. The most interesting thing about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to me is, one, it was a completely independently financed film. So this movie was distributed by a studio, but was completely made independently. So at the time of its release and its success, at the time when it came out, it was the highest grossing independent film of all time. So this was a completely independently made feature, but it had a pretty big budget. I mean, way smaller than Batman. This movie only had a $13 million budget. The other interesting fact about it is it was the last film that Jim Henson worked on before he passed away. He created the bodysuits that actors wore to portray the Turtles, and he said it was the most sophisticated puppetry outfits he had ever worked on. He passed away 2 months after the movie made its debut in theaters, so he did get to see how successful, he did get to end on a bang, to see his creation became a highly successful, well-regarded creatures. But the movie itself, based off the comics, partially based off a cartoon, we've got 4 teenage turtles that were mutated from small turtles by this ooze in a New York sewer. They were trained as ninjas by Splinter, their rat sensei. He was mutated as a small rat. This movie, again, it being an independent film, it's a rough looking movie. It's kind of the opposite of Batman, especially when they're talking about the transformation scene, the story of how the Turtles came to be. It looks like something that you would see in a short Sesame Street film from the 70s. It's about as low budget as it can possibly look. But the fight coordinated sequences and the actual turtle outfits, they're talking and you can see their mouths moving. They're pretty convincing. I mean, they look absolutely ridiculous, but they're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so it's a bunch of 6-foot turtles fighting people, which is most of the movie. There are a few characters involved here. Casey Jones, April O'Neil, who's a reporter, and the whole movie takes place. It's very New York centric. Takes place in New York. This is another movie where they pair off. We have this villain Shredder who is starting a teenage band of misfits. He's recruiting all these teenagers in New York City to help steal things and basically create a bunch of crime. And in this crime heat wave, the Turtles start coming in and cleaning up New York City, and then eventually go head to head with the Shredder. Again, it's another movie that's thin on plot, but it's a fun filled movie. Not a lot of names. This was a movie, again, because I think most of the money were put into the turtle costumes, but there is a very early role by Sam Rockwell, one of his first roles. He was one of the head thugs in the movie, and Donatello, the purple bandana turtle, is his voice is portrayed by Corey Feldman, and very, very distinctly, recognizably so. At the time this movie came out, I remember it being regarded as very violent for kids. It's rated PG, and I remember a lot of parents were like up in arms, though when you watch this movie now, it's so tame compared to anything that you would see on just regular television now. So I think this is, as of any movie that I've ever talked about on this podcast, this is about as kid-friendly as it'll probably ever get for a movie that I do for a pick of the week or like a regular feature. Unless we do like the Wizard of Oz or something, which I don't see happening. So yeah, I think this is a fun movie. The other sequels, I got to say, to me they're nearly unwatchable. I've seen the first reincarnation of the Turtles, which I was not into, but to me, this first one, it has a lot of heart. It stretches its limitations of its budget, but if you're into sort of the fun martial arts goofballness that could only happen in a early 90s action comic book movie, then I think you'll be happy to watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is another one that you can rent on most of your online sources. It was on Netflix for a while, but it's not currently on Netflix. But really, to be honest, if you're down with the VHS, you can walk into most any Goodwill store and get it for a quarter. I've yet to see one Goodwill that doesn't have it on VHS, and that's how I remember the movie, with the Pizza Hut commercial before the movie started.
I definitely remember those ads. It's been since the height of this movie since I've seen it, and you kind of retelling it brought it all back, and so I was doing research while you're talking, and I have to say that just from my limited research right now, it is a crowd favorite. Like people love this movie. The fact that this was Jim Henson's last movie before he passed away. I mean, think what you want of, human-sized turtles, whatever. Like, those costumes are awesome. I've always thought that. I mean, he was a master at puppetry anyway, but those costumes are incredible.
Yeah, and it's definitely a movie where, like, as a kid, each one of these turtles has their signature weapon, and they know martial arts, and
you know who they are. They've got different colored eye masks.
There's a lot of fun to be had, and definitely, like, it's one where, when you watch it now, it's totally ridiculous. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this is by no means a great film, but like, if you haven't seen it since you're a kid, it's worth popping in and checking out. And if you have kids, I think they'll probably love it.
Do you own this by any chance?
I do. I'll loan it to you.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
I just forgot mine to bring over to you.
No, it's fine. You forgot them last podcast too. But one of these days, I'll get to check out these movies. I'm gonna.
I'll just borrow it from you later, like when I'm settled, and then I can give you everything that I owe you. I still need to give you back Pacific Heights, which is now packed away with all my DVDs.
I forgot that you even had it.
I do.
That's all right.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I can't wait to rewatch this movie, and I love that it's been almost 20 years, basically, since I've seen it, and it was fun to revisit that. Thank you, Justin.
Well, thanks for bringing Wolf back into my life. It was one that I remember coming out, but I hadn't seen, so I'll have to track that down and check it out. Well, those are our picks of the week. Again, most of those you can find on any of your online rental sources. And then, without further ado, here's your Murray moment.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal. You're gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand-shucked?
The flowing robes, the grace, all striking.
That was fun.
Since we've been talking about Batman, you might think that this Murray moment would be about how Billy was once considered for the role that Michael Keaton landed. It's true, back before Tim Burton signed on, Ivan Reitman had been considered to direct Batman, and he wanted Billy Murray to be the lead role. But from what I can find, there's really not much to that story other than it happened and went nowhere. So, let's turn to another unknown fun fact involving Billy and bats. Baseball bats, that is.
What?
I know, you didn't see that coming. But, okay. We're gonna dial it back a little, maybe off the Chicago Cubs. Maybe you think I'm going there? I'm not.
I have no idea where you're going right now.
Okay.
But I'm along for the ride.
Back in 1978, when Billy was just gaining popularity by joining the cast of Saturday Night Live, before he had even landed his first lead role in a film, our Billy briefly joined a minor league baseball team out of Washington State, and they were called the Grays Harbor Loggers. This may sound like a tall tale, but I assure you that William Murray did indeed join the team. He was number 17. As it turns out, Billy was pals with the team's owner and had intended to hang out with the Loggers for that summer. Billy was quoted a few times saying that all he wanted to do after completing his first full season of Saturday Night Live was just to play baseball and golf. That's all he wanted to do. Now, he was primarily a coach and a pinch hitter. Billy was on the roster and played ball in 2 games, from what I can find. Billy's first at bat, he slammed a base hit into left field. He was pretty proud of that one, and he actually went up to the pitcher after the game and said, "That meant the world to me." Billy hung out with the team for quite a few weeks, mostly just doing base coaching. But during this time, he started noticing that no one was drinking beer at the games. And if you've ever gone to a baseball game, not drinking beer is a noticeable omission, for sure. And now, after learning that the city council of Hoquiam, where the Loggers played, had made it illegal to sell alcohol at baseball games, well, Billy went out and bought a keg, some plastic cups, and began selling it to the fans in the crowd. He's just a real problem solver, you know? Well, Billy was promptly arrested by police and only briefly detained after one of the Loggers' owners convinced police that they'd get a ton of bad press on both a local and national level if they went through with that arrest. Now, bailed out and with the team's best interest in mind, Billy would go on to pinch hit during one final game. Unfortunately, he wasn't as lucky the second time out, striking out on the 3 pitches he was served. 3 sinkers, Billy said, which are hard for anyone to hit. SNL creator Lorne Michaels did capitalize on this summer adventure of Billy's by making a segment for the following season of SNL called Things We Did Last Summer, a short film that included everyone from the SNL cast and what they'd gotten up to that summer. It's a pretty fun short film if you're able to track it down. Now, Billy concluded his summer by flying to Canada to meet up with Ivan Reitman and the cast of Meatballs, the film that would be his first lead role in a major film. Technically, Billy hadn't confirmed with Reitman that he was indeed doing the film until the day before shooting. After this time with the Loggers, Billy hit the ground running with Meatballs, which turned out to be a really big hit when it was released in 1979. During filming, Reitman liked to remind Billy that he felt like this movie was going to be a really big hit of the summer, to which Billy would respond, "I just wanted to play baseball." Billy had a long history with bats of the baseball variety. It's not only just with the Chicago Cubs, like I said. I hope this little story of Billy's time with the Loggers got you to understand a little bit deeper of a meaning of this man's love for baseball.
I don't know if I'm sure about this 100%, but I feel like 90% sure of it that Bill Murray recently has like a Facebook series about minor league baseball where they like follow teams. I think him and his brother.
Oh yeah. His brother,
him and his brother like follow minor league teams. Is that
yes
something? I like saw like a thing about it, but I haven't investigated
it is
too
yes
far.
it is totally a thing. He also, oh man, I forget the team. He also has like a certain he has fingers in some minor league baseball teams.
Yeah.
So he's definitely plugged in
and he
in
definitely
that department.
he definitely did commentary for a while, didn't he, with Harry Carey? Like games.
Yeah.
But he filled in too, didn't he?
Yeah, he's filled in before for Cubs games.
Yeah.
He's
definitely baseball's been part of his.
Yeah, he's no stranger to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that Murray moment.
Of course.
We'll wrap it up here. I want to say a big thanks to our friend Wade Durbin, because I really was a little worried going into this one, like we didn't have a lot of insight on outsider perspective or like comic book lover perspective, and I thought that it was really thoughtful of him to send a nice long message, like kind of like making a case for the Batman comic book fans, and also give us a nice dichotomy to like what we were discussing here on the episode. So thank you again, Wade, for your comment.
We needed that.
Yeah,
dude.
it definitely helped out a lot.
Do you have any final thoughts on Batman before we totally close it out?
I guess the only thing we didn't really get to mention was the music, which was I think to me, I mean, music is always like something that in movies that I gravitate towards, and I thought this was one of the few movies, and I know some people had a problem with it, but to me, one of the few movies that mixed perfectly a original score
by Danny Elfman,
which is excellent, and then original music by Prince. And at the time, both were released albums, which both I owned and like listened to nonstop. And as goofy as that song seems now, like, I mean, I had the cassette single of
the Bad Dance?
Yeah, it's so silly. But a lot of that original soundtrack's really great. I'm into it, you know. And I think that it was the Prince music was supposed to be like the Joker's music, and then Danny Elfman's music was supposed to be Batman's music. And I thought that was a great idea to like go into that and mixing pop music with orchestrated score. I think that's a hard thing to do, and I think it's one of the few movies that like did it well.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I would also say it goes in kind of with my final thought in that Batman, when it came out, it was kind of the first of its kind to have all of this hype and all of this marketing before it actually like came out. So we had, you know, whether it was two albums, like a original score of the film, or a Prince album, or cereal boxes, or figurines, or soda cans, or fast food. You know,
I think
food
that
that's coming out.
Batman symbol was on everything.
Yeah, Batman symbol was on everything.
Of.
And I was telling you too that like I had forgotten about this, but in my recent moving, going through like my entire life, I came across this photo of myself with this airbrushed black and white cowboy hat that had this black bandana around the brim of it, which was a Batman like thing. And it was, I have no idea where I got that, but I totally remember having it after seeing the photo and was like, holy crap. Yep. I bought into that too. And I know that was not the only, I remember having a tiny Batmobile that I'm not sure if that was like a McDonald's thing or something, but I remember having a tiny Batmobile.
I definitely remember eating the Batman cereal for sure.
Yeah. All of those things. And it's amazing too that whole marketing campaign that happened before Batman was ever released, if my research is correct, the money that came from that marketing campaign actually was more than what the movie grossed, which was a sickeningly amount of millions of dollars. But actually that marketing campaign was more than what the movie grossed, which is crazy. Anyway, I feel like that marketing campaign is kind of what has set the tone for what superhero movies do nowadays, for sure. Oh, I have one more tidbit just to throw in. A little. All right, well, it's quick. Just throwing dice in the alley here. Just a quick shout out to Marion Doherty, who I mentioned back in the Lost Boys podcast. That was episode 2. Marion Doherty did the casting for this film.
Man, it's crazy.
I love talking about this woman because it's
awesome.
Her name is plastered on so many movies, and obviously the woman had an eye.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I thought of you when I was watching Batman because her name popped up and I was like, Marion Doherty. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, Lindsay mentioned her in our Lost Boys episode.
Woman had an eye.
Yeah.
So thanks, Marion Doherty, for yet again supremely casting what turned out to be a great movie.
So if you've been following us for a while or you're just starting, thank you for your continued support and listening, your comments, your downloads. As always, you can find us at don'tpushpausedpodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram, where we're most active, Don't Push Pause Podcast. Facebook, Don't Push Pause Podcast. If you're listening to us on iTunes, it always helps, and feel free to leave us a review or give us 5 stars if you feel so inclined. That always helps a lot. It helps shows that we've got listeners and we've got support, and we can continue to move forward and reach a broader audience. So we don't have an announcement for our next film, so that's going to be a surprise.
Ooh, that's right. Time. We don't.
It's been a while since we've had the surprise, but that will be announced soon. So look for it on our Instagram. What our next film will be.
I just got really stoked because I'm like, we don't.
Yeah, we got to figure it out. So until next time, I'm Justin Johnson,
and I'm Lindsay Reber.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.